frontal offset crash test, side impact, the pole test, pedestrian protection test. The big new model from Maruti Suzuki is going bigger. As it comes to market, the Victoris has been sent to global GNCAP for a voluntary crash test. The first Maruti SUV to score 5-star ratings for both adult and child occupant protection. 33.72 is the score for adult occupant protection and 41 on a total of 49 possible for child protection. Top marks, really. Here is how it got there. First up, the car was crash tested for frontal impact. The frontal offset test is carried out at 64 km per hour. Intrusion, that's the name of the game here, or the lack thereof, because that's what you're really looking for in terms of how the structure has been built. There could be various points that carry the energy from that impact force through the car and its own structure. And that's what you're really looking for at the end of the test. Now, of course, there'll be actual numbers that will come out and then you get the final score, which tells you the real outcome, if you will. But even if you look at it just visually here, there's so many things that you can pick up as cues. Look at the amount of impact that's been absorbed just by this front section over here. You don't really see any kind of burbling or welting of this A-pillar. You're not seeing any of it carrying into the roof, just a very slight dent over here. And then even the door, by the way, opens and shuts. There's different things that add up to those different scores, of course, but visually when you see something like this, it gives you a lot of confidence in assuming that when it comes to this kind of protection from a frontal impact, especially the offset impact, which is common, things are looking pretty good. The Victoris uses the hard-tech platform that most Suzuki models now sit on globally, the same as the Grand Vitara and even Swift. But this isn't the Grand Vitara with a different top hat. The Victoris has 6 airbags, child seat anchors, 3-point seat belts for all occupants, ESC or electronic stability control, and pedestrian protection also as standard. Something required now by global GNCAP's latest updated protocol for testing Indian cars. Structure and footwell areas have been rated as stable and can withstand further loading. Next, we had several pedestrian protection tests. When it comes to voluntary tests of this kind, there is a fair amount of confidence that a manufacturer, in this case Suzuki, would have in the capability, what it would expect from the car in a test like this. And that doesn't just come from engineering planning or CAD designing or simulated kind of experiences before the car starts getting built. It also comes from extensive testing. And remember, Maruti has made significant investments towards that. And so you do actually have facilities very similar to this one, tests exactly like this one that are carried out over many iterations of the car before it actually comes to becoming the final production design. First, I saw the pedestrian adult and child head form to bonnet test. This has an impact at 40 km per hour. Now, the thing with pedestrian testing is that you're basically trying to look at how the car performs in terms of being safer to the environment and therefore also the people around it, not just the people inside. The whole idea here, though, is to also keep your focus on 2 very important aspects. One, not just what applies to Indian regulations, but this car would be going to other markets, so it's got to also be sort of proofed to take on regulations in other regions. And then also future-proof, because, we may have new regulations coming in and this car needs to have a certain lifespan. So it's also kind of forward-looking, and that is why it goes beyond protocol. The pedestrian lower leg form to bumper test was then carried out at 40 km per hour, and then the car's high-speed stability was tested. Remember, I said ESC is now standard. Driver assistance technologies, or what we call ADAS, are offered as an option on the car. Next, the 2 side impact tests. First, the movable barrier test at 50 km per hour. And the car appears to hold its basic structural integrity. And then another Victoris was being prepped for the second side test, this time the pole test. When prepping, there are many things to consider since there are many data points to look for, right from where to place the dummies to how and where to use wet paint so that impact points are easy to spot, and also ensuring that all the systems to test the car are ready. Now, they call him a dummy, but I'll tell you what, he's the smarter one here amongst us, because he's going to actually know what happens in this test once it's carried out right away. It's the one thing that's going to send all the information, all the data points. What happens to the passenger who sits up here, right? And I, on the other hand, I'm going to have to wait for all the analysis, the number crunching to come in before I know what happens. This is going to be exciting because, of course, we've seen in the past as well cars failing sometimes at this particular juncture. This one, the confidence level is pretty high.
And the pole test was then carried out at 29 kilometers per hour.
I wish there was a way for you to really hear how that sounds. There's a certain magnitude to that impact that comes from the volume of it. But look at that. I mean, of course, the car may have slid off the platform, but from up here, you can already see that there's a certain integrity to the structure that's been maintained, certain parts that will have to be investigated. Well, first they're going to go down there and clean this up. Then we'll get down and get a closer look. When it comes to the scores that you see all of these tests achieving, there's lots of components that go into that final score, and that's why, in fact, you see a sort of a range that gives you either 4 stars or 5 stars or whatever it may be, because there's different things that add up. It's not just the structure, it's also some of the equipment inside, it's also things like the stability of the footwell area. You always see these terms being thrown around, and that's because there are different components that come into play that can either do really well or pull down a score. This also tells you that it's relatively simple, I won't say easy, but simple then, to go back and address some of those problems to also improve those scores. And that's what you see happening very often with voluntary tests. In this case, of course, the aggregate scores are already pretty strong. And this is also where that equipment like curtain airbags, for example, plays a huge role in terms of protecting the occupants inside.
It's a big deal because the manufacturer has made a shift and a commitment to the desire, and now they are showing their real commitment that it's not just a one car event. This is actually a whole philosophy change, and with this car it's definitely confirming the direction of the company, that we expect that shortly the rest of the fleet we get the same kind of treatment, the same approach of aiming to a 5-star performance.
The Victoris showed all body regions for adult occupants, showing adequate to good protection in all crash test scenarios. 18-month-old and 3-year-old child dummies showed full protection in the child seats as well. And ADAS is optional, as I said, which, by the way, global GNCAP plans to include as standard in the protocol in about 2 years' time.